It was a Saturday morning when I first noticed something was off with Amanda. She was perched on the edge of our couch, scrolling through her phone like she usually did, but her laughter had this foreign edge to it. Light, musical, a little too genuine. When I asked her what was funny, she quickly flipped the screen downward, brushing it off with a dismissive, "Just a meme." Amanda didn't normally guard her phone like that. The day went on, and I tried to shake it off. People laugh at memes. No big deal, right? But little things started adding up. Like how her phone never used to have a passcode, but now it did. Or how she'd take her calls out of the room, muttering something about needing quiet. I brushed it off as paranoia at first. We've been married for 8 years, and while not perfect, we've always been solid, or at least I thought so. But lately, Amanda had been distant, preoccupied, and there was this weird energy in the air I couldn't ignore. That night, as we were lying in bed, I noticed her texting again. The blue light from her screen lit up her face, but there was no smile this time. She looked serious, maybe even nervous. When I asked her if everything was okay, she jumped. "Yeah, fine. Just my sister asking about the kids." Her sister? Kelly lived in Colorado and barely texted, let alone called. Amanda turned her phone face down again and rolled away, mumbling, "Good night." The following week was no better. Amanda started taking client meetings at odd hours, ones that conveniently overlapped with dinner or the kids' bedtime. She was a freelance graphic designer, and her projects were usually remote, so the sudden uptick in in-person meetings didn't sit right with me. "You're really swamped lately?" I commented one night as she packed her laptop into her tote bag. "Yeah, it's a new client. Big project," she replied without meeting my eyes. Something about the way she said it felt rehearsed, like she'd practiced the line in her head before saying it out loud. "Who's the client?" Just some startup. You wouldn't know them." She kissed me quickly and darted out the door before I could ask more. A week later, the doubt gnawing at my stomach was unbearable. I tried to dismiss it as insecurity or paranoia, but every fiber of my being screamed that something was wrong. It all came to a head when I heard her on the phone late one night. I'd gone to grab a glass of water and passed her office, where the door was cracked open just enough to catch her voice. She was laughing, soft, intimate, and it wasn't the kind of laugh she gave me anymore. "Stop," she said, almost whispering. "You're terrible." I froze. My hand gripped the doorframe, my breath stuck in my throat. "Yeah, me too. I can't wait either," she added, her voice lower now. My heart sank, but I kept listening. "Okay, I'll see you then. Bye." When I heard her chair scrape against the floor, I darted back into the kitchen, pretending to rummage for something in the fridge. Moments later, Amanda walked in, startled to see me. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, her tone overly casual. "Just thirsty," I said, holding up the glass of water. "Who were you talking to?" She blinked, caught off guard. "Oh, just Kelly again. She's having boyfriend drama." Her sister hadn't been in a relationship in years. "Must be late out in Denver," I said, gauging her reaction. Amanda hesitated for half a second, long enough for me to notice before shrugging. "Yeah, she's a night owl." She leaned in to kiss me on the cheek, and I felt myself stiffen. "Coming to bed?" I asked, forcing a smile. "In a bit. I have to finish something for the client." Another late night. Another excuse. The next morning, I found myself doing something I never thought I'd do. While Amanda was in the shower, I unlocked her laptop. The password wasn't hard to guess. It was our son's birthday. Her email was clean, no suspicious messages, but her browser history was telling. A quick scan showed multiple visits to the website of a boutique hotel downtown. The Hotel Pendry. I clicked on the reservation tab and my blood ran cold. 2 reservations, both during times she'd claimed to be at client meetings. I shut the laptop quickly as I heard the shower turn off, my heart pounding in my chest. That night, as Amanda slept beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, betrayal, disbelief. But one thing was clear. I needed to know the truth. I wasn't going to accuse her outright, not yet. If I was wrong, It could ruin everything. But if I was right, the next day I called Ethan, my best friend since college. Ethan wasn't just a tech genius. He was also a PI on the side, helping corporate clients track down fraud and embezzlement. If anyone could get me answers, it was him. "Ryan," he said after hearing me out, his tone serious. "Are you sure you want to go down this road? If you're wrong—" "I need to know, Ethan," I said firmly. He sighed. "All right, I'll dig around. Give me a couple of days." As I hung up, a mix of relief and dread washed over me. I didn't know what Ethan would find, but I had a sinking feeling my life was about to change forever. The following days were a blur. Amanda was her usual self, well, her new self, acting just detached enough to seem busy but not enough to make it obvious. She smiled during breakfast, checked in about the kids, and even asked about my day. But every interaction felt like a poorly rehearsed play, with Amanda stumbling through the lines. Meanwhile, Ethan had already started digging. By the second day, he'd sent me a cryptic text. "Found something. Let's meet." We met at a dingy little diner on the outskirts of the city, the kind of place where no one pays attention to you unless you're ordering pie. Ethan slid into the booth across from me, his laptop bag slung over one shoulder. "All right," he began, lowering his voice. "You were right to be suspicious." My stomach tightened. "What did you find?" Ethan opened his laptop, turned the screen toward me, and pulled up a series of photos. First off, I tracked Amanda's phone activity. Nothing crazy, texts, calls. But her location data? That's where it gets interesting. He clicked on a map. Dots marked specific locations, with one recurring address standing out. The Hotel Pendry. "She's been there 3 times in the past month," Ethan said. "Twice during her client meetings and once on a Saturday when you were out with the kids." I stared at the screen, my mind reeling. "That's not all," Ethan continued. He flipped to another tab showing screenshots of financial transactions. "I checked your joint account and cross-referenced the dates. She's been making cash withdrawals right before these hotel visits. It's smart. Cash is harder to trace, but not smart enough." He sat back, letting the weight of his findings sink in. "And then there's this." He showed me a grainy photo from a security camera. Amanda was stepping into the hotel lobby, dressed in a sleek black dress I hadn't seen before. She wasn't alone. The man next to her was tall, mid-40s, with slicked back hair and an expensive-looking suit. They were standing close, too close. He had his hand on the small of her back, guiding her toward the elevator. "Who is he?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "That's what I've been working on," Ethan said. "His name is Nathaniel Reynolds. Goes by Nate. He's a venture capitalist pretty well known in certain circles. Amanda's name came up in a guest list for a gallery event he hosted a couple of months ago. I'm guessing that's where they met." I clenched my fists under the table, my nails digging into my palms. Ethan leaned forward, his expression serious. "Ryan, I know this is a lot, but you need to decide what you want to do. Do you confront her now, or do we keep digging?" When I got home that night, Amanda was already in bed, scrolling through her phone. She looked up briefly as I walked in. "Hey, how is Ethan?" she asked. "Good. Just catching up?" I said, forcing a casual tone. "Nice," she replied, turning back to her phone. I sat on the edge of the bed, watching her for a moment. She looked so normal, so innocent. But now, every movement, every smile felt like a lie. The next morning, I decided to test the waters. Over breakfast, I casually asked, "Hey, when's your next client meeting? Thought we could grab dinner afterward." Amanda barely looked up from her coffee. "Oh, I'm not sure yet. I think it's Thursday, but I'll have to check." Her answer was too quick, too vague. "What's the project again?" I pressed. "It's a branding overhaul," she said, her tone clipped. "Why all the questions?" "No reason. Just curious," I said, shrugging. Amanda shot me a suspicious glance before changing the subject, but I could tell she was on edge. Over the next few days, I kept a closer eye on her. She was careful, almost too careful, but small cracks in her facade began to show, like how she'd spend extra time in the bathroom with her phone, or how she'd suddenly have urgent deadlines that required her to stay in her office late at night. Meanwhile, Ethan sent me more updates. He'd managed to dig up emails between Amanda and Nate, recovered from her cloud account. The messages were flirty, borderline intimate, but what really set me off was the way she talked about me. Ryan's been so distant lately. I feel like we're just roommates at this point. He wouldn't understand what I need. Not the way you do. Each word felt like a knife to the gut. The breaking point came a few days later when Amanda announced she had another meeting. "Client wants to go over some revisions," she said, slipping on a fitted blazer. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. Sounds important. As soon as she left, I grabbed my keys and followed her. I wasn't proud of it, but at this point, I needed to see it with my own eyes. I trailed her car from a safe distance, my heart pounding with every turn. Sure enough, she pulled into the Hotel Pendry parking lot. From across the street, I watched as Nate approached her, greeting her with a kiss on the cheek. They walked into the hotel together, laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. I sat there for what felt like hours, anger boiling inside me. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. This was real. When Amanda came home that night, I was waiting for her. "How was your meeting?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "It was fine," she replied, avoiding my gaze. "Why?" "No reason," I said, smiling tightly. But inside, I was already planning my next move. The next morning, I felt like a bomb waiting to detonate. Every glance at Amanda fueled the storm brewing inside me, but I knew I had to keep it together, for now. If I lashed out too soon, she'd deny everything, flip the narrative, and gaslight me into thinking I was crazy. I needed her to slip up. That evening, I decided to bait her. As she was chopping vegetables in the kitchen, I leaned against the counter, feigning casual curiosity. "You know," I began, "I've been thinking about taking a day off this week. Maybe surprise you during one of your client meetings. We could grab lunch after." Amanda froze for a fraction of a second before resuming her cutting. "Oh, that's sweet. But my meetings are usually all over the place. Hard to plan anything." She didn't look up. "Well, maybe I could drop by and say hi to your client. It'd be nice to see you in action," I added, pushing harder. This time, her hand slipped, and the knife nicked her finger. "Damn it," she hissed, sucking on the small cut. "Are you okay?" I asked, watching her closely. "Yeah, I'm fine," she said quickly, turning to rinse her hand under the sink. "It's just, I don't think my client would appreciate that. They're kind of private." "Private, right?" I nodded slowly. "Makes sense." But inside, I knew I'd struck a nerve. Later that night, Amanda retreated to her office again, claiming she had more revisions to work on. I stood outside the door, listening. The muffled sound of her voice confirmed she was on the phone. I cracked the door open just enough to hear. "I know, I hate sneaking around," she was saying. "But you don't understand how controlling he can be." "Controlling? Me?" My jaw clenched as she continued. "Yes, I'll see you Thursday. Same place." I didn't need to hear any more. The next morning, I called Ethan and told him to meet me at the diner again. When I arrived, he already had a folder waiting for me. "What's this?" I asked, sitting down. "Everything you need to blow this wide open," Ethan said grimly. Inside the folder were printed copies of Amanda's emails, texts, and even a hotel receipt with both her and Nate's names on it. There was no longer any room for doubt. "She's meeting him again Thursday," I told Ethan. "At the Pendry." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "What's your plan?" "I'm going to confront her," I said, my voice cold. "Ryan," Ethan said cautiously, "you need to think this through. If you confront her in public, it could get messy. Hell, she could turn it around on you." "Let her try," I snapped. "I've got the proof now." Thursday arrived faster than I expected. Amanda spent extra time getting ready that morning, spritzing on perfume she usually reserved for special occasions. "Big meeting?" I asked, my tone light. "Yeah, it's important," she replied, avoiding my eyes. I nodded, biting back the venom I wanted to unleash. As soon as she left, I grabbed my car keys and followed her again. At the Hotel Pendry, I parked across the street, watching as Amanda met Nate in the lobby. This time, there was no hesitation. They embraced like lovers, their bodies pressed close as they whispered to each other. My blood boiled. I got out of the car and crossed the street, my heart pounding in my chest. By the time I reached the lobby, they were already heading to the elevator. I followed at a distance, catching the door just before it closed. The ride up was silent. Amanda and Nate were too engrossed in each other to notice me. When the elevator dinged, they stepped out, walking hand in hand toward a suite. I waited a beat before following. The door clicked shut, and I could hear their muffled voices inside. Taking a deep breath, I knocked. There was a pause, then the sound of footsteps. The door cracked open, and Amanda's face appeared, her eyes widening in shock when she saw me. "Ryan?" she stammered. "What are you doing here?" "Funny. I was about to ask you the same thing," I said, shoving the door open. Nate was standing by the window, looking just as stunned as Amanda. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded. "I'm her husband," I said, my voice ice cold. "Who the hell are you?" Amanda stepped between us, her hands raised. "Ryan, please let me explain." "Oh, I'd love to hear it," I snapped. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been screwing this guy behind my back." "It's not what it looks like," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "Don't you dare," I growled. "Don't you dare insult my intelligence. I've got the receipts, Amanda, the emails, the texts, the hotel visits. So spare me the lies." Nate cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. "Look, man, I didn't know." "Shut up," I snapped, glaring at him. "I'm not here to talk to you." Turning back to Amanda, I said, "How long has this been going on?" She hesitated, her lip trembling. "A few months," she admitted. "A few months," I repeated, the words tasting bitter. "And all that time you lied to my face. You let me believe we were okay while you were out playing house with this guy." Tears streamed down her face now. "Ryan, I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to." "To what?" "To get caught," I barked. She flinched, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "I'm done," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "I'll have the divorce papers drawn up by the end of the week. You can explain this mess to the kids yourself." I turned on my heel and walked out, slamming the door behind me. The morning after the confrontation at the Pendry, the house was eerily quiet. Amanda hadn't come home, which suited me just fine. I didn't want to see her face, hear her voice, or feel the air crackle with her pathetic attempts at justification. I dropped the kids off at school, faking normalcy as best I could. "Mom's working on a project," I told them when they asked why she wasn't at breakfast. Their little faces seemed unconvinced, but they didn't press. When I got home, Amanda's car was in the driveway. My stomach turned at the sight of it. I found her sitting on the couch, still wearing the same clothes from the night before. Her hair was a mess, her makeup smudged. She looked like she'd been crying all night, but I couldn't bring myself to care. "We need to talk," she said softly as I entered the room. I dropped my keys on the counter and crossed my arms. "I don't think there's much left to say." "Ryan, please," she pleaded. "Just give me a chance to explain." I laughed bitterly. "Explain what, Amanda? That you've been sneaking around with some rich asshole while I've been at home raising our kids and paying the bills? Or that you had the audacity to lie to my face every single day?" Her lip quivered, and for a moment, I thought she might actually say something meaningful. Instead, she broke down, covering her face with her hands. "I don't know why I did it," she sobbed. "I was lonely, okay? You've been so distant lately, so focused on work. Don't you dare put this on me." I snapped, my voice rising. "I worked hard to give this family everything we needed. I trusted you, Amanda. I didn't cheat. I didn't lie. And I sure as hell didn't go looking for someone else to fill whatever void I was feeling." Her tears kept flowing, but they only made me angrier. "Was it worth it?" I demanded. "Risking our marriage, our family, for what? Some cheap thrill?" "It wasn't like that," she whispered. Then what was it? I shouted. What did he have that I didn't? She didn't answer, and her silence was all the confirmation I needed. The next few days were a whirlwind of pain and paperwork. I contacted a lawyer, someone Ethan recommended, and began the process of securing my assets. Amanda had no idea, of course. She was too busy wallowing in guilt, pretending like she still had a say in how things would play out. On Ethan's advice, I started compiling evidence. The emails, texts, photos, and bank statements. I wasn't just going for a divorce, I was going for blood. One evening, Amanda tried to talk to me again. "Ryan, please," she said, her voice trembling. "Can we at least go to therapy? For the kids' sake." I looked at her, incredulous. "Therapy? You think therapy is going to fix this?" "It's worth a try," she said, tears brimming in her eyes. "Let me make one thing clear," I said coldly. "I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this for me. And I sure as hell won't let you drag the kids through this mess you made." That weekend, I arranged for the kids to stay with my parents. I didn't want them in the house while I dealt with Amanda. When I got back, Amanda was waiting for me in the living room. She looked more composed than she had in days, but her eyes still carried the weight of guilt and desperation. "I talked to Nate," she said quietly. "Good for you," I replied, brushing past her. "He said he's willing to talk to you," she continued. That stopped me in my tracks. I turned to face her, incredulous. "Talk to me? About what?" "How he enjoyed sleeping with my wife." Amanda flinched, but she stood her ground. "I know you hate me, Ryan, but I don't want things to end like this. Please just meet him. Maybe it'll help you understand." "Understand?" I laughed bitterly. "The only thing I want to understand is how you plan to explain this to the kids when they realize their mom destroyed our family." The next day, I got a call from Nate. "I know this is awkward," he began, his tone infuriatingly smooth, "but I wanted to reach out man to man." "You've got some nerve," I growled. "I know," he said quickly. "And I'm sorry. I didn't realize Amanda was married at first. By the time I found out, it was already complicated." "Complicated," I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "You mean screwing a married woman while she lied to her husband?" He sighed. "Look, I didn't handle this well. I just want to make amends." "Amends?" I snapped. "Do you think this is a car accident? You can't pay for the damages and make it go away." "I don't expect forgiveness," he said. "But I'd like to meet, if you're open to it. Face to face. No pressure." I hung up without answering. That night, I sat alone in the living room, nursing a glass of whiskey. My mind raced with thoughts of revenge, of making Amanda and Nate pay for what they'd done. But no matter how many scenarios I ran through, nothing felt satisfying enough. The truth was, nothing I did could undo the betrayal. Nothing could erase the image of Amanda and Nate together, laughing, touching, lying to me. But I wasn't going to let them walk away unscathed. The next morning, I made a decision. I texted Nate, "Let's meet. Tomorrow, 7 p.m. The Pendry Bar." His reply came almost instantly. "I'll be there." Amanda didn't know about the meeting. She didn't know about the lawyer, the evidence, or the trap I was setting for her and Nate. By the time I was done, they'd regret every choice they made. I was done playing the victim. Driving home, a strange mix of emotions washed over me. Anger, sadness, relief. The confrontation had been brutal, but I felt lighter somehow, as if a weight had been lifted. For the first time in months, I felt like I was finally in control. The Pendry's Bar had that upscale vibe you'd expect. Polished wood, dim lighting, overpriced cocktails. I arrived 10 minutes early, nursing a bourbon neat while my mind played out every possible scenario. By the time Nate walked in, I was primed for war. He spotted me quickly, his tall frame and tailored suit cutting through the crowd. His face wore the same smooth charm I'd seen in Ethan's photos, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease as he approached my table. "Ryan," he said, extending a hand. I didn't take it. He dropped his arm awkwardly and slid into the chair across from me. "Thanks for agreeing to meet." "I didn't do it for you," I said, taking a slow sip of my drink. Fair enough. He signaled the waiter and ordered a scotch. Look, I want to start by saying I'm sorry. Truly. If I'd known Amanda was married. Cut the crap. I interrupted, my voice low but sharp. You knew. Maybe not right away, but you knew. And you kept going. Nate's jaw tightened, but he nodded. You're right. I did. And I regret it. I leaned back, studying him. Regret it? That's convenient. Tell me, Nate, did you regret it when you checked into a hotel with my wife? When you whispered in her ear, made her laugh, told her whatever lies she needed to hear to keep coming back? He opened his mouth to speak, but I cut him off again. Don't bother answering. I already know the truth. Nate looked down at his drink, swirling the amber liquid. I don't expect forgiveness, he said finally, but I want to make things right. I laughed, a bitter sound that drew a few glances from nearby tables. Make things right? How exactly? You think you can undo months of betrayal with an apology and a drink? I know I can't, he admitted, but I'm willing to help. Financially, emotionally, whatever you need. The arrogance of it all, the audacity to think he could throw money or hollow sympathy at the destruction he'd caused, made my blood boil. I don't need your money, Nate, I said coldly, and I sure as hell don't need your pity. What I want is for you to feel every ounce of pain you helped cause. By the time I left the bar, I had everything I needed. Nate's discomfort told me he wasn't as bulletproof as he pretended to be, and his willingness to meet, that was his first mistake. The next day, I met with Ethan to finalize my plan. You sure about this? He asked, his expression cautious. Absolutely, I said, my voice firm. Ethan nodded and handed me a USB drive. Here's everything. Emails, texts, bank records. Enough to bury both of them. Perfect. And you're ready for the next step? He asked. I smiled grimly. Oh, I'm ready. That evening, I waited until Amanda was home. She was in the kitchen, cooking dinner like nothing had happened. It was almost laughable, the way she carried on, pretending we could go back to normal. We need to talk, I said, stepping into the room. She turned, her face wary. What about? I know about the money, I said, cutting straight to the point. Her eyes widened. What money? The withdrawals from our joint account, I said, my tone icy. The ones you've been using to fund your little rendezvous with Nate. She stammered. I was going to replace it. I just needed... Stop, I snapped. You don't get to play the victim here, Amanda. You lied, you cheated, and you stole from me. Do you have any idea how pathetic that makes you look? Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't let up. And now you're going to face the consequences, I said, pulling the USB drive from my pocket and tossing it onto the counter. On that is everything, your emails, your texts, your financial records. I've sent copies to my lawyer and a few other people who might find it interesting. Her face went pale. Ryan, please, don't do this. Why not? I challenged. Because it might ruin your reputation? Because people might finally see you for who you really are. I made a mistake, she sobbed. I know I hurt you, but I love you. I love our family. Can't we try to fix this?
Ich zerrte her, incredulous.
Fix this? There's no fixing this, Amanda. You made your choice, and now you get to live with it. The fallout was swift. The next day, I filed for divorce and froze our joint accounts. Amanda's friends, family, and even her clients started receiving anonymous tips, screenshots of her emails, photos of her with Nate, proof of the hotel stays. Her phone blew up with calls and messages, but I didn't care. Let her deal with the mess she'd made. As for Nate, he didn't escape unscathed. Using Ethan's connections, I leaked his involvement to his business partners. Turns out, infidelity doesn't play well with investors. By the end of the week, his company's board was calling for his resignation. On the day Amanda moved out, the house was silent. She packed her things quietly, avoiding my gaze. When she was done, she stood in the doorway, clutching her suitcase. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't respond. As she walked out, a strange sense of relief washed over me. The betrayal still stung, but for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was moving on.